Take the exit. Turn right into the drive-thru.
Nope, I'm making dinner tonight.
You don't have time. Josh has practice.
Oh, that's right. I'll just get a salad.
And fries?
No, just the salad.
But salad cancels fries.
Salad only.
Fries.
Salad.
Fries.
Food noise isn't fair, but Mochi Health is. The affordable GLP-1 source that puts you on the road to successful weight loss.
Hey, can I get the...
Fries.
Salad. Sorry.
Learn more at joinmochi.com. Mochi members have access to licensed physicians and nutritionists. Results may vary.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Okay, partners in true crime fans, we have an exciting new podcast that we've been working on for the past few months, trying to get it to you guys, and we're getting ready to launch it now, and we're launching it today. And it's a case that is pretty crazy. It's a case, I'm a huge sports fan, huge NFL fan. I love football. I follow football. And I remember when this case happened, and it was in 2009, and it kind of shook the sports world. And because this person was such an icon, and he was such a heroic story, just coming from a small, area in the South. And then he went to even kind of like mid-range college, and he just kind of blew things out of water. And then he got into the pros, and then he shocked the world. He literally shocked the world. And he basically resurrected a franchise, a new franchise that was moved from one city to the other. And that person I'm talking about is Steve McNair. Now, if anybody knows anything about sports in the last 20, 25 years, everybody knows Steve McNair. Okay. And we all kind of think we know this story and his tragic end and what happened to him. But, nothing really made sense. And, it's so strange for me and us, because we were sports fans. I made my wife into an NFL fan.
No, I like the NFL before you.
But anyway, she's a big bettor, by the way.
I am a big bettor, and I win. But this story was really important for us because of the facts of the story that were never really shared with the public. And we've been digging into it, and it really resonates with a lot of the work that we've done on a lot of other cases where there's a public story and then there's the real story. And I think that that's the exciting part about this podcast, is that we're going to have people speaking to us who've never spoken publicly about this case before and revealing information that hasn't been out there. And I think it's really important for families and victims to have this kind of a platform to speak about the things that they're not allowed to speak about. And this case has so many rabbit holes that you could go down into. Once we start getting into it, you're just going to be like, I can't believe what you're saying. So
we want to introduce you to the person in the other box here. This is Trace Sheehan. He was the gentleman who brought us the case and the access and the family. And we were delighted. We've been literally talking about this for a good 4 or 5 months, just kind of organizing everything, because there's a lot of people to organize, and there's a lot of hot topic buttons that, we're going to start poking holes in. We're going to start really rattling cages, because I think when we just started diving into it, I just couldn't believe, based upon all the cases that we've covered in the past, and majority of the ones that we cover have some element of law enforcement failure. And so and then we're huge law enforcement proponents and stuff like that. We bring a lot of law enforcement on these. And
we're not here to shine a light on their failures, but what it is ironic is that these stories keep coming to us. So I do think it's really interesting, and obviously there's a reason for that. So I think, Trace, why don't you just kind of walk us through how you got involved in this case, why you wanted to do it, and what does this case mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you. It is so great to be connected with you guys and to be your partner in true crime. This story is incredible. And for me personally, it's been a little bit my white whale of something that I've been trying to get out there for a while. I'm a documentary producer like you guys by trade. Have done it almost 20 years now. And this one's had a lot of attempts and some false starts and a different version, pardon the NFL pun there. But, it's tough getting the full story out there. And so to have a platform like this where we can present it all, and, it is going to be hard to say definitively, is it this, is it that, is it the other thing? But the totality of all of these, the evidence, the inconsistencies, there is something here. And I'm just grateful to have partners like you guys to help bring it out into the world. Similarly, giant sports fan, been a fanatic my whole life, particularly football. Same boat with Aaron McNair. I mean, I remember when he almost won the Heisman playing for the HBCU Jackson State. I mean, it was just unheard of back then. They weren't on TV, but who's this guy? As you said, makes it to the NFL. Oilers from Houston get moved to Tennessee. Is a bit of a mess, and he gets his chance and almost wins the Super Bowl. He was the co-MVP with Peyton Manning that year. And, went on to have a great NFL career. As great as he was on the field, he was a hero off the field for his community in Mississippi. And then, the tragic news struck July 4th, 2009, that he had been murdered. It was just unfathomable. I mean, he had only been retired about a year, and he was just, again, this like larger than life football hero. And, when the details of the story started to come out, it wasn't a great look. He was cheating on his wife. And apparently, as per the Nashville police, it was his mistress, the 20-year-old Jenny Kazemi, who supposedly killed him and then herself. I didn't think much more than that, like anybody at the time. It wasn't until many years later I had heard a podcast that started to dive into this, just very kind of surface level. But there was one character that was interviewed who intrigued me the most, a guy by the name of Vincent Hill, who was a former Nashville police officer turned private investigator hired by the McNair family. And when I say the McNair family, I think, as we'll learn, that's a couple different branches, specifically Steve's mother, Lucille. And Vincent was just, again, so obsessed with this project as well that in order to be retained, he had to have some sort of financial payment. So I think he charged her $1 and told her, I'm not going to stop until we bring justice and closure for you to this case, because she doesn't think, a lot of people don't think that it went down like the Nashville Police Department said it went down. So as a good producer, documentary producer, I reached out, got in touch with him. Turns out he was an anchor on the local news affiliate in Tulsa, Oklahoma, my hometown. So we had that in common. We hit it off. I learned he wrote a couple books on this very subject. One of them was called Playbook to a Murder. So I optioned his book, and that was the title of the documentary pitch that we were going out with. From Vincent, I was able to connect first to a close, I call him a member of the family. He's not blood, but Doc Stevenson was Steve's godfather. He's been a family friend. He's kind of their consigliere. He's the forward-facing person for Steve's blood family as it relates to the media, law enforcement. He's a professor at sorry, I said Jackson State, Alcorn State is what I meant.
Alcorn State, yeah.
At Alcorn State. And he's a great guy. And I got to talking to him through Vincent, has all the same questions. And I really through him began to see just how complicated this gets, because we can get into all the details of who was where at what time and what was the relationship of this person to that person, because there's a lot of inconsistencies there, particularly starting with a man named Adrian Gilliam. But it possibly goes even further than that. And that's where Doc Stevenson started to take me down to the rabbit hole and talk about some of the concerns that the family members had. And then through him, I actually met Steve's oldest son, Stephen McNair Jr. Little Stephen, they call him. And, he's done his best to live his life and create, his own thing. But it's been really hard for him. One, not having a father for a good deal of his life, but two, just having to live with, how he's been remembered, that he's been remembered for this murder, supposedly by his mistress. And nobody actually thinks that's the case, except for the Nashville Police Department, who came to that conclusion after a whopping 4-day investigation and have since refused to open it back up despite all kinds of evidence to the contrary. So here we are.
I mean,
as I said, there are a few different versions of this story that we tried to get out there. Might as well talk a little bit about the Netflix Untold that came out last year, that I had a lot of conversations with those filmmakers and producers to be a part of that project. I was going to bring the access that I had to people like Vincent, who did end up appearing in a short interview, but the family, Doc Stevenson, Lucille is the mother, Freddie, the brother, and Stephen Jr. They ended up not being able to come to terms on their participation. So we stepped out, the doc got made, and we ended up watching this and saying, well, it was a very nicely told story about Steve, but it really did not get into any of the hard-hitting questions about the murder itself. It just kind of took for face value, well, this is what happened. And the thing that stuck with me the most is they basically gave the last line of the doc to the guy who we have the most questions for. Robert Gaddy.
We felt the same way.
There crying these crocodile tears saying, you know what, I think we ought to just let it go and just, honor Steve that way. Well, I bet you would like to think that.
Yeah. I just think that the first time I heard that there was because I never really did a drill down on this, when it happened, because there's so many unfortunate things that happen with NFL players. I mean, it's kind of a roller coaster ride for a lot of them, and all the quick money and the all the adulation and the freedom they get, and a lot of them take advantage of it, and they get themselves in positions, and we've seen it, everything down from O.J. Simpson all the way down to Pac-Man Jones is in and out of the law all the time, and then you have these these horrible things that happen to the players, whether or not they're either involved in it or they're victims of it. So it's like on either side. So, and when we started doing research on this, and I think one of our first conversations, just kind of laying out the land with all the players that we're going to have on there. So all the people that weren't on the Netflix doc are going to be on this podcast. And that all the basic, the family, the access to all the people, the close people, Stephen Jr., they're all going to be on this, and they're going to tell us their story and their side of the story. But when we discovered that it was like a 4-day homicide investigation, okay, and that's basically equivalent of, even if they had videotape of the murder, it would take longer than that. They would analyze it and they would really kind of cover their bases, because especially in such a high profile case like this, you wanted to make sure there's no stone unturned in an investigation, because there's so much media attention regarding this, and to basically a folk hero in not only in Tennessee, but in the NFL and in the nationwide. So that was a really big red flag for us, because we know how these investigations run. We know we have friends who have been long investigators
and worked with police who do not give up. Even when I had one case where they thought it was a suicide. The detective did not believe it was a suicide, but he was forced to say that publicly. And 3 years later, the guy who murdered that woman, who was not a suicide, killed someone else, and they had to go back and they had to exhume the body and they had to prove that she was murdered. It wasn't a suicide. So there always is, when you're dealing with law enforcement or any kind of agency, there's always going to be the path of least resistance. That's what we've experienced. And it seemed with a case that was so hot and public, this was the path of least resistance. I mean, if people don't really know about the case, was it Nashville?
Nashville, yeah.
Yep.
I don't know why I always think Memphis. Nashville, Tennessee, which is not that big of a city. And you have this massive story, this massive case where it's international. Everybody knows Steve McNair. Even if you don't know about football, you know who he is. I mean, he was such an icon. So I'm sure in their world, they just wanted it to go away as fast as possible. And that's the experience that I've had dealing with cases like this where, and I understand, I mean, it's a small law enforcement department. They might not have the resources. I understand all of that. But if you have found evidence, which you have, to go back and reinvestigate, that should be a prerogative for the family to be able to do that. And that's maybe what we need to start focusing on nationally, because this is not just isolated to Nashville, Tennessee, or Steve McNair. This is a bigger problem in this country. So I think it's really important to understand that this isn't just a family going, we're not going to accept this ruling. This is a family that's done their own investigation. And we've seen this time and time again. And they have been able to uncover new evidence that should be looked into.
Yeah.
So, and the other side of this story that always gets overlooked is Jenny Kazemi.
Yes.
And her family.
Mm-hmm.
She has a sister who I believe lives in Australia. It's been tough to make contact with her family, but not only have they lost a loved one, but her legacy is that of a murderer who was sleeping with a married man. When in what we all think is reality, she was a victim as well.
And honestly, Trace, that was one of the biggest pulls for this case for me, was her. Yeah. Because as a 20-year-old girl, as a 20-year-old girl who, was living in Los Angeles at one point, I get that.
20-year-old Iranian American, worked at a Dave & Buster's.
Exactly.
Was dating this NFL quarterback. It's like she hit the lottery. They were in love. There are text messages back and forth about how much they loved each other. And
at 20 years old, you don't know anything. You don't know anything. And you're being romanced by this amazing man who's like an icon. Yeah. I mean, you're just in love. You're not thinking about anything. Right. And
but then to make the jump that I might lose you, or okay, maybe you're dating somebody else, even though you've just paid for my car and you paid for this and you paid for my apartment and you paid for this, I'm going to kill you. If I can't have you, nobody's going to have you. Like, that's a pretty big jump in logic. And then you start adding in, she had plans to hang out with a friend that night. She wasn't even supposed to see Steve. All of these things happen. And the only person that ties the gun to her is this guy, Adrian Gilliam, who, guess what, is an ex-con who did time for murder, that during a burglary that went wrong, he killed somebody. And here he is being interviewed by the Nashville Police Department, and they are basically teeing it up for him. We FOIA'd their evidence, and so we have this interrogation, this tape, and they are saying, this is who you sold the gun to, right? This is the person. Jenny Kazemi's her name. I mean, they are just spoon-feeding him what to say. And he ends up changing his story multiple times. His alibi falls through. He ends up copping a deal because as an ex-felon, he's not even supposed to be possessing a gun. I mean, the whole thing stinks.
Yeah. Unbelievable. That to me, just when you told me that it's a possible, it was a homicide, so it wasn't even, it was a murder investigation, that they interviewed him at his house. And that's, is that correct? Did they interview him at his residence?
What I have is in the office, they interviewed him twice. The first time they interviewed him, like his fiance or his wife was next to him. So he wasn't telling all the information, because it turns out, and this is something we're still trying to get access to, we can't, that there were to the tune of hundreds, if not thousands, of text messages between Adrian and Jenny prior, that he's like, oh no, I had never really met her before in my life. I sell used cars, and I put my business card on people's cars at the mall parking lot where her Dave & Buster's is. And she called me about a car, and then we got to talking about buying guns. So I sold her a gun for $100. Like, he was making up this story kind of on the fly. And yet there are all these text messages that have never been released to the public. We just know they exist. And if you talk to Vincent Hill about it, then you start to learn that, okay, maybe Adrian Gilliam was their drug supplier. And maybe Adrian Gilliam was friends with somebody who had a beef with Steve McNair and had a falling out with Steve McNair over a considerable sum of money. And so you start seeing all these other connections that yeah, why didn't they get investigated? And I think you're right. I think they were under a lot of pressure to solve this high profile case. And once they had a pretty convenient story, that was it. Sweep it under the rug. It's done. It's like the old HBO show, The Wire. Like, you're not taking a murder off the books, McNulty. Like, process.
Absolutely.
I think that's best case scenario. If you talk to some family members, they think it's a little bit more nefarious than that.
I'd have to agree with them on that after reading and digging into this.
Who pushed this narrative forward because they did not want themselves to be investigated, especially when it comes to the case of Steve McNair had $20 million in a bank account that had never been seen from again.
Yeah, I would agree with the family on that. I do believe that there is something else going on here that's deeper than what we believe on the surface and more than just like trying to shut down a case quickly. I think there's connections and tentacles that go up to the powers that be in that area that they're trying to protect. And we've seen it before. I mean, I went to high school with someone who was wrongfully convicted of murdering his parents at 17, and the cops basically forced him into a confession that he was 17 years old, and he spent 18 years in prison, and they found out that it was his dad's business partner and that the cops were involved with the business and that there was a lot of money involved. And, if you follow the money,
right? Like look for motive, follow the money.
Follow the money.
Yeah.
What's the motive?
I mean, not
what
to
is this
spill the
20-year-old
tea here,
girl?
But yeah, Michelle, the widow, she knew what was going on. Everybody knew that Steve had this apartment downtown and what it was used for. And she feared that their marriage was probably coming to an end. She feared it so much so that she reached out to this Doc Simpson, talked to him about financials and these hypotheticals of, if anything, God forbid, would ever happen to Steve, what would happen to me? How much money would I get? What's in this prenup? What's in, his will? All of this information. And it turns out she was only going to get the house she lived in and $300,000. Now, he played in the NFL for about 10 years, and you can estimate his worth to be around $80 million or so. And she was going to get a house and $300,000. And also pretty suspicious to be asking these questions about a month before he turns out.
That was my question. When did she ask these? I mean, come on, that right there.
Memorial Day weekend, she paid a visit down to the family's house where Lucille lives in Mississippi. And we've talked to Doc Simpson. He's willing to talk about this conversation he had with her. And the very next question from there is, okay, well, there are all these legal documents. Where are they? Okay, well, they were drafted by Steve's agent, a guy by the name of Bus Cook. Those documents in 2009, we had email, we had computers, disappeared. Couldn't be produced, couldn't find them. Neither his will nor his prenup, which other family members had seen, knew what was in them. They were never subpoenaed. And so as a result of missing this documentation, all control of the state goes to Michelle.
Interesting. And then the other thing I was going to say is that really kind of was a red flag for us. You have Vincent, and he was a former Nashville cop, and a fairly, he was a good cop. He just, he had some issues with them towards the end, and they try to, and he can speak to that on his own. But why would he take this on unless he knew something in the catacombs of the Nashville Police Department? And, we're going to talk to some retired Nashville police officers as well. And we're going to talk to as many people as we can to try to find out what really went on and what was the method and the psychology behind tackling this case. Because everything that I've heard so far, and we've done some preliminary interviews with people and also the Netflix doc, and it was to give them like a little bit of leeway. It was part of a series, so it wasn't a full-fledged docket. So it was called Untold. So they only have a limited amount of time to really get into the case. But we don't normally do a case unless we have the victim's family. Unless we can hear from them.
But I also think that format for that show, because we do know those producers. I mean,
we know those guys. They're great.
It's just not
fantastic.
they're wonderful people, and they're really, really talented. But I don't think that format
they're limited by screen time. They're limited by amount of characters. They're limited by budget. And also a lot of people don't want this story to be told. I have pitched it as a documentary to a lot of, let's say, platforms or channels that have close relationships to the NFL, and the NFL does not want this story being told. There is a reason Steve McNair, the hero that he is not in the Hall of Fame. Like, that alone is crazy. What he did on the field certainly deserves it.
Has he been nominated yet at all? No. Not even nominated.
Yeah, the whole thing, his whole legacy has been swept under the rug. And so that's where, when you talk about the victim's family, you get to meet Stephen Jr., he feels like his father has lost that McNair legacy. Like, it was just taken away from him as well. And so he is on a mission to not only restore his father's name, but kind of in the process, his own. And that's just fascinating.
What is the public stance from the NFL on this? Has anyone talked to them?
I just think it's dark, right? It's just they want to package themselves as family-friendly content. And yeah, there's adultery. That is part and parcel of this case. Then you start asking questions about his agent. This guy, Bus Cook, represented a lot of people. He represented Brett Favre, represented Cam Newton. On the Brett Favre of it all, there's another documentary there.
Exactly.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's a lot of players where there's a lot of
questions involved around this
questions
guy.
And a lot of things.
He's a powerful player. And so, at the end of the day, there's just a lot of, nope, we're good. We think it's very interesting, but there's no smoking gun. It's not definitive. We're going to pass. There may not be the one smoking gun, but there's a lot of smoke in the room.
There's a lot of smoke in the room. And I think that's, just going through the timeline of the events, which we're going to break down, there's a lot of inconsistencies and reasons why they waited 45 minutes to dial 911.
That bothers me. Okay. We have another case where that happened. And I'm sorry, that doesn't happen in real life. Like, if you're in an emergency,
you got something to hide.
Exactly. If you're in an emergency, I mean, even something that's benign, it's not even life threatening. The immediate response. I was in the supermarket the other day, for example, and an older woman dropped a glass bottle and cut her leg. We immediately called 911. Like 5 people immediately called 911, and the woman was clearly not going to die. So when you're telling me that they waited 45,
calls a friend first, calls a few other people first.
Who does that?
Yeah,
who does that?
Maybe take some money out of a safe that only he knew that was there.
Now tell me a little bit about.
Watch the people who had the keys. Who knew both sides of Steve's life. And Robert Gaddy, his supposed best friend, is one of those guys who checks both boxes.
So Robert is the one that came. I just want for our
Robert
listeners
Gaddy,
to understand.
was a former offensive lineman of Steve.
Sorry. Can you just? I'm sorry, I interrupted. Can you start over because I was stepping on you?
Yeah. So Robert Gaddy is one of Steve's former offensive linemen going back to their Alcorn State days. And once Steve made it to the pros, Steve kept Robert on as his bodyguard, as his friend, and later business partner. They owned I think it was like a bar, club, restaurant together in Nashville. And, I think, as you were saying, like a lot of NFL players, people hit you up, here's some money. Okay. Well, about a month or two prior to Steve's murder, there had been some money missing from the restaurant. Not a lot of money. Not a lot you would think merits murder, certainly. It was only like $13,000. But Steve found out about this. Apparently, Gaddy had pitched him that he wanted to open up a new place. Steve said no. Gaddy took the money anyway. Steve felt like his trust had been betrayed, so he essentially fired him. He kind of cut Gaddy out from his life after that falling out. And I don't know all the details of what happened in their relationship between that moment in time and the murder. But when the sort of landlord friend character goes into the apartment to grab a beer, and Steve was going to the 4th of July softball game, he was the one who discovers the bodies. He's the guy who makes a call to Robert Gaddy. And Robert Gaddy explicitly told him, don't call 911. I'll be over there. And then drives from his home, it was like 30 minutes away or something, gets there. waits about an hour to finally call 911, makes a few other calls in the interim. And I've spoken to one of the other Nashville police officers who was at the scene of the crime that first day. And she flat out told me, as soon as I walked onto that crime scene, that apartment, I said, this has been staged.
Wow.
She just knew it. And she then proceeded. I didn't ask her a single question on the Zoom. She just talked for 30 minutes about all the different reasons of why she came to that conclusion. So, yeah, Gaddy, definitely a person of interest. A lot of people close to him said after Steve's death, like, guy went through some rough life patches, like put on a lot of weight, went incommunicado from like their group of people. Just wasn't at the funeral, I believe. Like just a lot of questions, and then he pops up in this Netflix doc, just weeping tears, saying he misses his friend, and we should all just let it be. So there's definitely something there with him. And the last piece, that if you talk to Vincent Hill, that Robert Gaddy and Adrian Gilliam were friends. It was known that they would hang out together, not only at the club that he owned, but other clubs in and around the Nashville area, which becomes a little suspicious when you realize that Adrian's the person who allegedly sold Jenny the gun and had so many conflicting stories about. So, these two guys are friends. That is not good.
No.
Yeah.
And it's so upsetting when there's a best friend involved or a family friend or someone that you've known, they've known each other for a long time. It happens all the time.
It does.
I mean,
and then you add in the forensics of the deal that there were two different types of casings found at the scene of the crime. Two guns, right?
Yep.
How does that fit with a murder-suicide? Murder-suicide, you should have gun residue on both your hands. No gun residue on her shooting hand.
And she was tiny. She was small.
She had never fired a gun before in her entire life.
There's no way. See,
Steve was murdered with 4 kill shots. Temple,
no,
heart lung.
Listen, I'm telling you, that was the thing that made me really want to do this. When he took me to I hate guns. I'm just going to say it. I know everybody loves their guns, but you can have your guns. I just don't like them. I don't care what you do with them. Don't hurt anybody. He took me there once. The gun range. And I'm telling you, it is not easy to shoot a gun. And it's not easy to shoot a gun when you're 90 pounds and you've never shot a gun before. And to make those kinds of
the person you love more than anything you want to spend the rest of your life with. Yeah.
I don't believe that.
That is difficult, if not impossible.
No, and she was under the supervision of a firearms instructor, an LAPD firearms. So she was having problems just
holding it. I mean, I'm pretty good at eye-hand coordination, but I was having a hard time holding it and handling it. So someone who's never used a gun before, there's just no way you'd be that precise. I don't believe that. My gut says no, so I go with my gut. And that little girl is the reason why I wanted to do this, besides Steve and his legacy, because that is a shame for him. That man was an icon, and shouldn't be brushed under the rug. All the hard work that he did and all the people that he inspired in the NFL and everything else. That's a shame, and that shouldn't be. But also that this girl is being labeled a murderer, and I don't believe that she did murder him.
Not only did she lose her life, but that's her legacy.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's a horrible legacy. And it's like we were talking about, it's like majority of these types of crimes are usually someone that knows them very closely.
Crimes of passion.
Yeah. And it's like, it's very random. It's not random, that these things happen. So most of the cases we deal with are people that know the victim or have been scouting the victim.
And there's money involved.
And there's money involved.
Drugs are involved. There's always something.
Yeah. So it just doesn't, the stats are there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so here's this story, right? At the perfect intersection of sports and true crime. I mean, I argue there is not a single bigger case out there, and yet it hasn't been told.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, the only other case bigger than this is the O.J. Simpson thing, as far as sports related.
That's right.
And that, and we know how the
biggest unsolved, that's for sure.
Exactly. And I get hammered all the time by these private investigators because, and just going just a quick rabbit hole there, though, about the OJ case where they don't believe, they not only believe that OJ did it, they believe that his son helped him. And there's a lot of
the funny connection between, none of this is funny, it's a bad word, but the connection between OJ Simpson and this case, So we all know that OJ, when he needed some money, was paid to write that "If I Did It" book. Here's how I did it. So Vincent Hill has been tracking Adrian Gilliam for a long time. He's easily findable online with the books he's written. Somebody reached out to him about a year ago. I believe it was outside of Atlanta, Georgia, a woman from a car dealership who's apparently was in some kind of a relationship with Adrian Gilliam. And during one of their conversations, Adrian Gilliam was telling her about the Steve McNair murder and how he wanted to write a book that was, "If I Did It, Here's How I Would Have Done It."
Wow. Huh.
Why would you even bring that up?
Because people have a conscience, okay? They do. And they do want to get caught, okay? Even if it's subconsciously. I mean, they really look at all the things that
I have no idea.
And
cases. Obviously that story needs to be verified, talking to this woman and getting all the details. But yeah, or just, money and not that bright. Who knows?
Yeah, or it's part of their
statute of limitations is passed and they can't book them anymore. I
also think it's narcissism.
There's no statute no statute of limitations on murder.
No, but also narcissism that they think that they've gotten away with it. Nothing's going to happen to them. They're just going to live their life and that's it. But also maybe there's a conscience there. You can only hope.
He's gone 16 years with no real punishment, apart from whatever plea deal he struck with the Nashville Police Department that they don't want to talk about.
No.
Yeah.
So he worked at a car dealership. Do you know
his last known whereabouts? That's Vincent would have to take it.
Yeah,
over.
no,
Elaborate on that.
I think Vincent was telling us he knows where he is and stuff. But yeah,
I mean, that's the guy to talk to, right? You want that Robert Durst moment from the Jinx where it's like, yeah, I did it. I killed them all. But I think the question is, all right, so if we're really going to stop tippy-toeing around here, and if we think Gilliam and Gaddy pulled the trigger, I think the question then becomes, were they acting alone for this beef over $13,000, or were they put up to it by these other powers that be, looking at Michelle, looking at Bus Cook, looking at the people who stood to benefit? Now, I don't think Bus Cook is going to off his star client.
No, I don't see that.
If this thing has already happened and there's $20 million involved and control of the estate, and hey, nobody wants this narrative to be spoken about anymore. Could you help me make these documents disappear? How much is that worth to you? Something
either
like
that or he just wasn't. He doesn't want to be involved at all, and so that's just kind of just cleaning the deck there.
Right. So that's what the family thinks, and who am I to say? I don't know anything for certain, but there's a lot of motive, there's a lot of suspicion, and there's a ton of unanswered questions and inconsistencies.
Yeah, no,
so put it all out there and see what happens.
Absolutely, and I think we're going to try to put up as much as we can. And all the work that you've done and Vincent's done is incredible. And because normally we're usually starting from scratch on these things.
So great, Trace, to have a partner like you who has digging like we do. It's amazing. We're so excited.
The feeling is mutual. Thank you.
Yeah. So, in relation to that, what were the things that you have done and what you want to continue to do that now we have this platform to really kind of get it out there and let audience members make their own decisions? Because we're not saying who's guilty. We're not saying who's culpable for these crimes. All we're doing is providing information, and that's what we do. And then hopefully, people hear it, and the right people hear it, and hopefully this stuff like this, because we've been successful in getting cases transferred to other divisions federally, from local to federally, and because that's what would needed to be done on this case, because obviously that when you think about a murder investigation was done improperly. And it's to me, it's almost like a civil rights violation against Steve McNair, because he didn't get his due process.
And that's it. I think you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's what I would like to see. And my involvement, such as it is with this story, is simply as a documentary producer who's gotten to know members of this family over the last few years and had a lot of heart-to-heart conversations with them, in a business, you guys know this business where everybody's out for a buck, and, we get a bad rap, but, not all of us. And in having these conversations with the family, it's just clear that there's pain there still, 16 years later, and that's a long time not to have closure. So I think that's my goal, is for those who are willing to talk about this case and have information about this case, give them a platform for their voices to be heard, and see where it goes from there. Because, we've seen the power of this format, being able to shine a light, and you get a community involved, and they get motivated, and they start asking questions, and there's a groundswell of support for it that no longer can be ignored, no longer can be swept under the rug. And so with any hope, the case does get reopened and given its due justice.
Yeah. And I want to just address something that you said earlier about people think, we chase these stories, it's some sort of money grab. If you saw the level of effort that we have to do in order to really investigate these cases, it's a 7-day-a-week, 24/7 thing, because you don't know when you're going to get information. You don't know who you're talking to. You're constantly following possible false leads, going through paperwork. And so, when we take these on, that's why we always say we try to make sure the family is involved, because we don't want to look at these things if the family doesn't want to look at these things.
Right. And also, like you're saying, Trace, you spend a lot of time with the family and you really want to help them. And that's what it comes down to, because they don't have any other resources. They've exhausted the resources. There's no one out there helping them get the answers that they deserve. Because like you said, Steve McNair did not have due process of the law. It was just brushed aside.
This particular instance, it's really two sides of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And one side is preventing the other side from talking.
Yeah.
Because they don't have anything else, they're still kind of under Michelle's thumb as it relates to the estate and, money that they depend on, that they have to be nice to her. Otherwise, she'll cut that off, or she'll cut off access to the grandkids, or as she did with the mother, kick her out of her own house.
That's horrible.
That's awful.
So yeah, when you have situations where the family's bifurcated like that, that does complicate it. It's hard enough when they're together and they're all in unison. But, when you have, and obviously you have a lot of money involved, we're talking an estate, was worth $20 million?
More. 20 million went missing.
We're talking upwards of almost $100 million.
That's what I've heard from everybody. And so then the question becomes, why now? All right. Why has it changed? Mm-hmm. And I think the answer to that is the matriarch of the family, Lucille. She's getting on in age, and I think she's had a few health scares, and she just wants closure.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, nothing else matters anymore. And I think the rest of the blood family is starting to feel the same way as well, and just sort of let the chips fall where they may. But it's time to speak out on this.
Mm-hmm.
Have you spoken to Lucille?
I have not.
You have not?
Only through Doc.
Only through Doc. What does he say about her? What kind of what is her thoughts, or she's convinced that this was not what it is, what the people are saying it is?
I don't want to presume to put words in her mouth. I mean, that's what I have been led to believe, but I also do think the pressure that has been put on her by Michelle, the widow, is the reason that she has been reluctant to say anything.
Got it.
I think she's reached a point where she just can't hold her tongue anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get over these things.
That's what we think. That's what I mean. I don't know why she would come to any other conclusion than we're just three random people who are looking at the details of the case, and this is her own son. So
that's what I'm saying.
She knows all these details.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, you can't get past this if you're a mother and that's your child. You just can't. It carries your weight on you for the rest of your life. And I can't even imagine what that poor woman's been through. It sounds awful. And I'm sure she intuitively knows what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we had a brief Zoom with you and some of the other players, just kind of preparing to go on this voyage and this investigation. And Steve Jr., I mean, he didn't talk much on that Zoom, and he just seemed kind of glazed over, and I felt bad for him, because it's just like he doesn't. I can't even imagine, because how old was he? He was like, because he's like, how old is he now? He was probably just like a preteen. He was
like 15. Yeah,
teenager when it happened.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's a huge.
And so the thing is, and I don't even know if we've established this for the audience, but Steve had 4 sons, and 2 of them were from previous mothers, previous relationships, Ben and Michelle. So for Stephen Jr. and his brother, who's also named Stephen, makes things confusing.
It's like George Foreman, huh?
Yeah, they've almost just been completely erased from that legacy, because the only media that's really ever been done was done with Michelle and her 2 children, which was like a ESPN, one of those like E60, putting the pieces back together type profile. And, that was the family. Well, it's like, hang on a second. There are these 2 other sons who have had to fight to maintain their connection to their father, and also the financial benefits that he intended for them to have.
It's awful.
And they're grown men now.
Yeah.
How much older are they? Do you know how much older they are than Steve Jr.?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it's not terribly dissimilar.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking, maybe 10 years from the oldest to the youngest, give or take.
And have they ever spoke publicly about this at all?
No, none of them have.
Be interesting to get their perspective as well.
Yeah.
Because, they've been kind of just thrown into the shadows. It's a mess. This is a mess, this case. I mean, we deal with a lot of messy cases, and this one, like, it's a big mess. And it's
it is, and I think it's deliberately so.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's interesting that police officer, her first instinct, and she rattled off her reasons, was to say that the scene looked staged. That's not something that a police officer would say.
No. I mean, it was as if she had been waiting to tell somebody this for ages. I do my research. I have a list of questions I'm going to ask. I didn't ask a single question.
Wow.
As soon as we got on the Zoom, she just started talking.
Mm-hmm.
And I gather she's not with the Nashville Police Department anymore.
No, she's not anymore.
I don't know how you could be. I mean, it's like, we deal with these cases with, shenanigans go on in investigations, and there's, as soon as they get too deep, they have to start covering up. I mean, we're in the middle of one right now in Oklahoma, where we believe the law enforcement it wasn't like they did it on purpose. They just didn't do their job right. And now they're shutting everybody out, and they're not even the family. And it's been almost 2 years. And so it's like, there's this kind of weird dynamic that happens in those departments, that they just want to try to run out if they don't have an answer right away and they can't close it out, and they don't have anything that they can charge, and they just kind of try to run out the clock, and hoping that, someone will forget about it and that it'll do, and that's for this. They basically, they beat the clock on this one.
Yeah. Me, Vincent, some of the others were somewhat optimistic. About 4 or 5 years ago, Nashville had appointed a new police chief, and it was like their first or second ever Black police chief. And so, that gave the family and Vincent some optimism and say, all right, maybe we can bring this evidence back to light, and, he'll see it through a different lens. And no, he reached the same conclusion of his predecessors, that it's best to keep that stuff under the rug.
Sure. Why would you want to start your career off with like controversy? And it wasn't
right, or do the right thing, and it is a social justice issue, and this hero of your town was murdered, and the culprit is still at large, and
isn't that the job?
Yeah, it's risky. Isn't that the job? Right?
Isn't that what we pay them for? Aren't they public servants?
There's a statue of the guy, but I guess you don't really care that much about him.
Isn't that what the job is? I mean, we know so many amazing law enforcement personnel and agents and amazing people who just really take that oath seriously. And to them, when we tell them some of these things we're running by them, they just can't believe it. They're just like, how? This is your job. You chose that job to protect.
Yeah. No, I have a guy I grew up with who was a homicide detective for 25 years in New York City. And I always run this stuff because, like, for some reason, we always get these cases that are like in southern states and Oklahoma, Nashville, all over the place. But
mostly Oklahoma.
A lot of Oklahoma.
We're always in Oklahoma.
There you go.
Got that good old boy Justice.
Exactly. But I run these things by him. I go, well, this is what they did. And I send him the case. And, I've always tried to get him on the podcast. And he goes, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. He goes, because I would get so mad. I would start ripping them to shreds, and I can't do that, because it's just what you're showing me is so screwed up that, because
there is. And, I think the connective tissue of a lot of those cases is this entrenched power structure of good old boy Southern justice, maybe epitomized by the phrase, we don't take kindly, right? Like, it's just, if we don't like the cut of your jib, I'll say we, but talking as them, then they'll do whatever they have to do.
Exactly. And it goes all the way up the ladder.
Yeah. And you would like to think that times have changed, but I think if you spoke to a lot of members of the McNair family or anybody else who's been wrongfully accused or not gotten their justice, they would still to this day have stories to tell and tell and tell and tell and tell.
Well, listen, I mean, when we did a wrongful conviction documentary with Georgetown students looking at 5 cases in 2018, and before that, I was on the fence about the death penalty. Some part of me felt like you really need it, and then after that, when I saw how quickly the justice system can really kind of screw up and throw an innocent person away. And there was a lot of them.
And the most disturbing part of it is they'll bring these experts in, and these experts are supposed to be the sounding board of justice. And what they are is just going to lean towards whichever direction they're pushed in. Yeah, and that was the most disturbing part for us, is really unraveling these expert witnesses that you're relying on to tell the truth.
Yeah. And then the aha moment is when we would get like a new DA, a white hat DA, who never knew about the case, and it happened like 30 years ago, and we present all the information. He's like going, how did this even get to a conviction? And you're like, here's someone who's a legal person who's looking and saying that this guy shouldn't be in prison.
Right. Well, it turns out they had so-and-so judge who went to this high school who knew this person. And
this was in Buffalo that we helped get Valentino Dixon out of jail, and it was a big deal. And he was, when he was young, he was gang banging, all this stupid nonsense. So they just immediately were like, oh, forget it, he did it.
Yeah, if we didn't get him for this, he was eventually going to kill somebody.
So it's like you're coming in with a preconceived opinion. That's not justice.
And they give him a defense attorney who's falling asleep in the courtroom.
Either way, I mean, I think here it's very clear from the evidence that we've seen and the research that we've done so far, which is not even is only a thimble compared to what you've done, and Vincent, and everyone else who's been working on this for years, is to see there's glaring evidence that needs to be reinvestigated. It's glaring. It's not just like, oh, well, maybe. No, this needs to be reinvestigated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's all we can do is have the experts who have found this evidence themselves, bring it to light and see what happens.
Yeah. And keep the story alive for the family. And hopefully, there's some sort of information that we can kind of uncover, or someone will want to speak to us who's going to rattle the cage, and we'll get that information. We write letters to the Justice Department all the time.
Today, in fact, to the president again.
Exactly. So it's like, and we actually have some connections there too. So it's like we'll get it in front of people to take a look at least to get a second look at it, because I definitely think this needs a second look. But we're excited to join this journey with you. We're going to be, like we said before, we're going to be bringing on, family members, former Nashville police, Vincent Hill, who's been, I think, just been really dogged on this case. Just in a preliminary conversation with him, he's got a fire in him about this.
Mm-hmm.
And when people see when we bring him on, and he'll be on several times because he's got a lot to say. And so between that and the family members and some of our outside experts, we're gonna run this through the sausage grinder and come up with some answers.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But we appreciate
I appreciate you guys and opportunity to ask these hard questions, because until these hard questions get asked, you're just going to have these easy answers, and the easy answers don't really get you to the truth.
Yeah.
They don't. They really don't.
I know. All right, Trace.
We'll get there.
All right. So until we meet again, my friend, thank you so much.
All right. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.